My heart stopped when the phone rang at 2 a.m. An unknown number, glowing in the dark, like a warning I couldn't ignore. I was 16, tangled in blankets, the world outside my window, silent, except for the faint hum of a distant street lamp. The air in my room felt heavy, as if it knew something I didn't. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the answer button, every instinct screaming to let it ring. But curiosity, that reckless spark, won. I pressed, "Accept my voice," barely a whisper. "Hello." A man's voice, low and deliberate, slithered through the line. "Hi." It wasn't a greeting. It was a hook, sinking deep into my chest. I didn't recognize him. His tone was too calm, too intimate for a stranger. "Who is this?" I asked, sitting up the bed sheets, pooling around me like a barrier that wouldn't hold. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Look outside your window." The words were a command, not a suggestion, and they landed like ice in my veins. My room, once a sanctuary, felt exposed, the window a gaping eye into the night. I laughed, a brittle sound, and told him to get lost hanging up before my courage could falter. The phone rang again, and again, 4 times each chime, louder, more insistent, clawing at my resolve. I answered, my voice shaking. "Who the hell is this?" This time he spoke with a sickening familiarity. "One of your friends gave me your number. I'm the guy you've been talking to." My mind raced, grasping for a name, a face. Cameron. It had to be Cameron, the friend of John, my friend, Karen's boyfriend. We'd met once, exchanged a few messages online, but nothing more. He was nice, harmless, or so I thought. But how would he have my number? My address? The questions churned, and then I heard it, a faint rustle outside my window, like footsteps on gravel. My heart slammed against my ribs. Was he really out there? I clutched the phone tighter, my voice barely steady. "Cameron." A pause then. "Yeah." He sounded pleased, like I'd passed a test. "Look outside." The command again sharper, now laced with something darker. I told him to go home. My words brittle and hung up. The silence that followed was worse than the calls. It pressed against me, thick with dread, as if the night itself was holding its breath. I couldn't stay in my room, not with that window staring at me, not with the noises, real or imagined, echoing in my head. My parents' room was next door, and the thought of waking them felt childish, but the alternative was worse. I needed to move. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floor, and crept toward the basement. To get there, I had to pass the back door, its glass panels glinting faintly in the moonlight. What if he's watching? The thought rooted me in place. For a moment, my hand trembling on the doorknob, I forced myself forward, the glass door a gauntlet I had to cross. In the basement, the air was damp, the shadows deeper. I dialed Karen, my fingers fumbling. She answered groggy, her voice a lifeline. "Karen, someone's calling me, saying it's Cameron. He says he's outside my house, telling me to look out the window." I heard noises. "Is it him?" Karen's voice sharpened. Sleep burned away. "What I never gave Cameron your number. Or your address. Hold on." She put me on hold, calling John on her home phone. Minutes stretched, each one a lifetime, until she came back. "John's with Cameron right now. He didn't give out your info either. If someone's outside, you need to call the police. Now." Her words were a punch, knocking the air from my lungs. If it wasn't Cameron, then who was it? The phone vibrated in my hand. Another call, the unknown number, glaring at me. Against every shred of sense, I answered. "I know you're in the basement," the man said, his voice smooth, predatory. "I saw you walk by the back door." My blood turned to ice. He had seen me. The glass door, the moment I'd passed it, exposed in the moonlight, he'd been there watching. My knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, the concrete cold against my skin. "Come outside," he said, not a request, but a promise. I stammered, "I'm calling the police," and hung up, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Why hadn't I called them already? Panic clouded my thoughts. A fog I couldn't shake. The phone rang again. I answered, unable to stop myself, as if the call itself had a grip on me. "Come outside," he said, "or I'm coming in to get you." The words were a blade slicing through what little courage I had left. My breath hitched, my eyes darting to the basement stairs. The glass door loomed in my mind, a fragile barrier between me and whatever was out there. I couldn't stay here alone in the dark, but going upstairs meant passing that door again. The thought of seeing him, his face pressed against the glass, his eyes locked on mine, made my stomach lurch. I had to move. I had to get to my parents. I ran, my footsteps echoing in the silent house, the glass door a blur as I passed it. Upstairs, I locked myself in my room, clutching a baseball bat I kept under my bed. The phone kept ringing, each call a taunt, a reminder that he was still out there. I answered one last time, my voice barely a whisper. The man's tone had changed, shaken, almost frantic. "The police are here. They stopped me outside your house. They want to talk to you." A new voice came on, calm, official. identifying himself as an officer. He asked if I knew the man, reciting my address to confirm. "No," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't know him." I hung up the bat still in my hands, my eyes fixed on the window. The calls stopped. The night stretched on endless as I sat there, bat in hand, every shadow a threat. I didn't sleep, not that night, not for weeks. The police never told me who he was, only that he was gone. But gone didn't mean safe. I begged my friends, the few I had to admit, it was a prank, a cruel joke gone too far. They swore it wasn't them. Their faces pale, their voices earnest. I wanted to believe them, but the doubt lingered, a seed planted deep. What if he's still out there, waiting, watching his voice, ready to crawl through the phone again? Years later, I still check the locks twice, my heart racing at every late-night call. The memory of that night is a scar jagged and raw, a reminder that safety is an illusion. I was 16, stupid, reckless, but I survived. Barely. And sometimes when the house is too quiet, I swear I hear footsteps outside my window, and I wonder if he'll call again. 7 years ago, the night unfolded like a trap snapping shut around me with a single phone call. I was 15, curled up in my friend's bedroom, the world outside cloaked in a silence that felt too heavy, too wrong. The air carried a chill that seeped into my bones, a warning I didn't yet understand. That night, a stranger's voice would tear through my sense of safety, leaving scars that still ache when the house grows too quiet. Back in 2007, I was a lanky teenager navigating the awkward edges of youth. My mom, my anchor, was away on a business trip, leaving our small house in a rough-edged neighborhood to feel cavernous and exposed. The area wasn't outright dangerous, but it had a reputation, whispers of break-ins, shadows that moved too purposefully at night. Mom's paranoia meant I couldn't stay home alone for long, so I was sent across the street to my friend's house, a place that felt like a second skin. I'll call her Sarah, a name that fits her bright laugh and restless energy. I grumbled for days about being treated like a child. I'm 15, practically a woman, I'd argue. But the truth was, our house unnerved me at night, even with Mom there. The way the floorboards groaned, the way shadows pooled in corners, it was a place that held its breath, waiting. Sarah's house, though, was alive with warmth, cluttered with family chaos. Her parents were out that night, leaving us to our devices, and Sarah had just scored a PlayStation 3, a shiny new toy that drowned out my complaints. We spent hours sprawled on her living room floor, lost in a game that flickered across the screen, the pizza they'd bought us, growing cold on the coffee table. By 11 p.m., the novelty of the game had faded, and we retreated to Sarah's bedroom, a cozy mess of posters and fairy lights. My new flip phone, a birthday gift, was our next obsession. We scrolled through its grainy menu, giggling over ringtones and snapping blurry photos. The house was quiet now, the kind of quiet that amplifies every creak, every distant hum. Outside, the street was still the sodium glow of street lights, barely piercing the dark. I felt a prickle on my neck, a fleeting unease, but I brushed it off. Just the night playing tricks, I told myself. Sarah flopped onto her bed, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Let's mess with your mom," she said, her voice low, conspiratorial. I raised an eyebrow. Mom had a ritual. No matter how exhausted, she'd check the answering machine the moment she got home. It was a quirk we teased her for, but it gave us an idea. Let's leave a dumb message. I agreed already, imagining her exasperated laugh when she heard it in the morning. We huddled over my phone, dialing our home number, the speaker crackling to life. The plan was simple. Say something silly, maybe pretend to be a telemarketer or a lost pizza delivery guy. We stifled giggles as the phone rang once, twice, 3 times. 5 rings. Then the machine, I thought, counting silently. But on the 3rd ring, the line connected, and a voice answered. "Hello." The word hit like a stone, sinking into deep water. It was male, low, gravelly, like someone who'd smoked through decades of regret. There was no warmth, no curiosity, just a cold edge that made my stomach lurch. Sarah's smile froze her eyes, wide as mirrors. I clutched the phone, my thumb hovering over the end button, but something held me there, pinned by the weight of that voice. This isn't right. My mind raced, grasping for logic. The answering machine should have picked up. No one was home. Mom was 2 hours away, and I was here. My mouth went dry, the air in the room suddenly thick, pressing against my chest. Sarah whispered, "Who's that?" But I couldn't answer. The voice spoke, again slower this time, each syllable deliberate. "Hello?" I tried to speak, to demand who he was, but my voice caught a weak squeak, trapped in my throat. Pattern. Interruption. The game was supposed to be fun, but now you're trapped, listening to a stranger who shouldn't be there. My heart thudded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I managed a shaky, "Who are you? Why are you in my house?" There was a pause, long enough to feel like drowning. Then, in a tone that curled around my spine like ice, he said, "You shouldn't have called." The line went dead. I dropped the phone, its plastic shell clattering on the floor. Sarah grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "What the hell was that?" she hissed, her voice trembling. I couldn't answer. My mind was a storm of questions, each one sharper than the last. Who was he? How was he in my house? What did he want? The room felt smaller, the fairy lights casting jagged shadows that seemed to writhe. Sensory overload. The air is heavy. The shadows move. Your pulse is a drumbeat, and the silence is a scream waiting to happen. We sat frozen, staring at the phone like it might spring to life. I wanted to call Mom, but the thought of hearing that voice again stopped me cold. Sarah's eyes darted to the window, where the curtains hung, still blocking the night beyond. "Do we call the cops?" she asked, barely audible. I shook my head, not because I had a better idea, but because I was paralyzed, my thoughts tangled in fear. Niestead, storytelling. I remembered a story Mom told me about a neighbor's house being broken into last year. The thief had slipped in through a back window, silent as a ghost, and was gone before anyone noticed. What if this was him? What if he was still there, waiting? The idea clawed at me, rooting me to the spot. But we couldn't just sit here. We had to do something. Sarah's parents were out, not due back for at least an hour. Her house was our only sanctuary, but it didn't feel safe anymore. I grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the door. "We need to check the locks," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She nodded, her face pale, and we crept downstairs, every step a test of courage. The living room was dark, the pizza box still open on the table, its greasy scent now sour in the air. We moved to the front door, my fingers trembling as I tested the deadbolt. Locked. The back door was next its glass panel, reflecting our ghostly silhouettes. Locked too, but the act of checking didn't calm me. If anything, it made the fear sharper, more real. What if he's watching us right now? I pushed the thought away, but it lingered a splinter in my mind. We returned to Sarah's room, locking the door behind us. She called her parents, her voice breaking as she explained. They promised to rush home and told us to call 911. My hands shook as I dialed the operator's calm voice, a lifeline in the chaos. "Stay where you are," she said. "Officers are on their way." We huddled in the corner of Sarah's room, pressed against the wall, as far from the door as we could get. The house seemed to breathe around us, every creak, a footstep, every gust of wind, a whisper. Trance. Loop. You're safe here. But are you? The door is locked. But what if he's already inside? You're waiting. But for what, rescue or something worse? My eyes kept drifting to the window, expecting to see a face pressed against the glass. but there was only darkness. Sarah's parents arrived first, their voices loud and frantic as they burst through the front door. We unlocked the bedroom door, relief flooding me at the sight of their familiar faces. But the fear didn't vanish. It coiled tighter when they insisted we stay put while they checked the house. Minutes later, the police arrived, their radios crackling in the quiet. I told them everything. The call, the voice, the words that still echoed in my head. You shouldn't have called. The officers crossed the street to my house, their flashlights cutting through the night. Sarah's mom held us close as we waited, the seconds stretching into eternity. When the police returned, their faces were grim. The wall-mounted phone in our living room was off the hook, its base cracked as if struck with force. My room and Mom's had been rummaged through drawers, ajar, clothes displaced, a subtle violation that felt like a punch. Nothing was stolen, they said, but the absence of theft made it worse. Why was he there? What did he want? They found no one, no fingerprints, no clues. The front door had been locked. No signs of forced entry. It was as if he'd vanished, a specter who'd slipped through the cracks of reality. Mom was called, and she drove home that night, her face a mask of exhaustion and terror when she arrived. We moved across town a few months later, unable to shake the violation of that night. But the fear stayed with me, woven into my bones. I couldn't sleep without checking the locks sometimes, twice, 3 times. Nightmares plagued me, faceless men standing in doorways, their voices low and cold. There's one detail I've never shared, not even with Sarah. Earlier that day, I'd gone home to grab a notebook, a collection of stories I wanted to show her. The house had been locked, no signs of tampering, but the moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The air was too still, the silence too deep, like the house was holding its breath. Goosebumps prickled my arms, and a chill ran down my spine, urging me to leave. I grabbed the notebook and fled, locking the door behind me, but the feeling of being watched clung to me like damp cloth, anchoring. That moment, that instinct. It's a weight you carry now. Every time you step into a quiet room, you feel it again, don't you? The sense that someone's there, just out of sight. Looking back, I wonder if he was already there, hiding in the shadows, watching me. The thought makes my skin crawl, a reminder that safety is fragile, that a single call can shatter it. That night, a stranger's voice reached through the phone and into my life, and I've never felt truly alone since. You shouldn't have called. Those words are my ghost haunting every quiet moment, a warning that some doors once opened can never be closed. My phone lit up with a restricted number, and something in my gut told me answering it would change everything. It was a Friday evening, the kind where the world feels sod and safe, wrapped in the glow of my living room lamp. I was curled up on the couch, a half-eaten bowl of popcorn on the coffee table, the faint hum of the TV in the background. My 2 kids, both under 5, were asleep upstairs, their soft breaths a rhythm I'd grown to love. The house was mine, a sanctuary built on routine and trust. But that night, trust became a luxury I couldn't afford. I'd spent the afternoon on a church Facebook group, a place where kindness felt tangible. Someone posted they needed a baby crib, and I had one gathering dust in the garage, an expensive model we'd barely used. I replied, offering it for free, and a man named David messaged me to arrange pickup. He seemed polite, grateful, even explaining his friend needed it. We swapped details, my phone number, my address, a time for his friend to stop by. It felt good, like I was paying forward a blessing. But as I peered at that restricted number flashing on my screen, my heart began to race, a primal warning I couldn't shake. I answered my voice, steady but cautious. "Hello?" A man's voice came through low and deliberate, like he was savoring each word. "You called for the service." He asked, his tone dripping with something I couldn't place. Amusement, maybe, or something darker. I frowned, shifting on the couch, the popcorn bowl sliding slightly. "No, I think you have the wrong number." He paused, then said, "No, I don't. You need the massage, don't you?" The words were vulgar, invasive, and they hit like a slap. I laughed, a nervous reflex, and said, "Sorry, wrong person," before hanging up. The silence that followed felt wrong, like the air had thickened with an unseen threat. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just kids, bored teenagers, pulling a prank. But there was no laughter in his voice, no hint of a joke, just that low, slow cadence, like he knew something I didn't. I checked my phone, scrolling through the Facebook chat with David. I'd given him my number only an hour ago. Was it a coincidence? My mind rejected the thought, but my body didn't. My hands were clammy, my pulse uneven. I locked the front door, double-checked the windows, and peeked into the kids' room. Their tiny chests rose and fell, oblivious to the unease creeping into our home. By Tuesday, I'd almost forgotten the call. Life had reclaimed its rhythm. Breakfast with the kids, daycare drop-offs, work. But then my phone rang, a blocked number this time. I ignored it, focusing on the spreadsheet open on my laptop. It rang again. My stomach twisted, a knot of dread tightening. I let it go to voicemail, but no message came. Wednesday morning, it rang again, the blocked number glaring at me like an accusation. I answered, thinking it might be IT about my computer at work. Hello? The same voice, unmistakable, cut through. I'm going to do things to you. You know what I mean. The words were crude, explicit, and they burned through me, leaving a trail of fear. How did you get my number? I demanded, my voice shaking. He hung up, leaving me with nothing but the echo of his threat. I sat there, frozen, the office around me, a blur of keyboards and coffee mugs. My address. I'd given David my address. If this was connected, if he'd shared my information, they knew where I lived. My kids. The thought was a vice around my chest, squeezing until I could barely breathe. I messaged David on Facebook, my fingers trembling as I typed. I've been getting obscene calls since I gave you my number. Did you share it with anyone? His reply came quickly, apologetic, almost frantic. He swore he'd only given it to 2 friends, Jose, who was supposed to pick up the crib, and Mike, who came instead due to a scheduling conflict. He sent me their names and numbers, begging me to let him know if they were involved. I wanted to believe him, but trust was crumbling. That afternoon, another call came, blocked again. I didn't answer, but the ringing felt like a pulse, relentless mocking. My husband, Tom, came home and found me pacing the kids' toys scattered across the floor like a battlefield. I told him everything, the words spilling out in a rush. He downloaded a call tracking app, one that promised to unmask blocked numbers. We sat together, staring at the phone, willing it to ring so we could catch him. The next day was quiet, a false reprieve. Then, an hour before dinner, it rang again. The app flashed 999, useless, a digital dead end. I answered, my voice sharp. Who is this? You know who I am? He said, his voice a blade cutting through my defenses. I want to taste you. My skin crawled, revulsion mixing with fear. How did you get my number? Is this Jose Mike? I threw the names out, hoping to startle him. He didn't flinch. Is this Michelle? He asked, throwing a name back at me. No, my name's not Michelle. Stop calling me. My voice cracked, desperation leaking through. You know who I am? He repeated, then hung up. I stared at the phone, the screen dark, my reflection distorted in its surface. He didn't react to the names. Was it them? Or someone else entirely? The calls kept coming irregular, but relentless. Each one a reminder that I wasn't safe. I changed my routine, avoiding the house alone, keeping the kids close. The crib sat in the garage, a monument to my mistake. I stopped checking the Facebook group, the place where kindness had turned into a trap. Tom installed new locks, a security camera, but they felt like bandages on a wound that wouldn't close. The police were sympathetic, but useless. No number, no evidence, no leads. I started sleeping with the phone on silent. But the silence was worse, a void where his voice could be lurking. One night, I dreamed of him. Not a face, just a shadow, standing outside my window, his breath fogging the glass. I woke up gasping, the kid's monitor glowing in the dark. I checked the camera footage, half expecting to see him there, but the street was empty. Or was it? A flicker in the corner of the frame, a shape that could have been a person, or just a trick of the light. I didn't sleep again that night, my mind replaying his words. You know who I am. Did I? Had I met him, passed him on the street, smiled at him in the grocery store? The thought was a poison seeping into every moment. Weeks passed, and the calls slowed, then stopped. But the fear didn't. I still check the locks, my heart lurching at every unknown number. My kids play unaware of the shadow that touched our lives. I gave away the crib, left the Facebook group, but I can't give away the dread. What if he's still out there, waiting for another chance to call, to remind me that my home, my life is never truly mine? 10 years ago, a phone call tore through the quiet of my dawn, a voice so close to love, it masked the danger lurking beneath. I was 18, tangled in the warmth of new romance, my world small and safe. But that morning, a stranger slipped into my life, wearing the voice of the man I trusted, and left me questioning every shadow, every silence. I was 18 in the summer of 2015, a girl caught in the dizzying rush of first love. My boyfriend, now my husband, was my world, his smile a tether to something solid in the chaos of youth. We'd been dating for a few months, our weekends filled with stolen moments at his parents' house, a sprawling place with wide windows and a freedom that felt infinite. That weekend, they'd been away, leaving us the run of the house and his car. We drove through the city, laughed until our sides ached, and lost ourselves in each other, the kind of reckless joy that only comes when you're young and fearless. My apartment was a cramped rental shared with my mom in a quiet part of town. It was modest, but ours, the walls papered with memories, photos, ticket stubs, my clumsy attempts at art. My room was my sanctuary, a clutter of books, fairy lights, and a bed that sagged under the weight of too many pillows. That night, I'd collapsed into it, exhausted from the weekend, my phone tucked under the pillow, its battery half dead from constant texting. The city outside was still the hum of traffic, a distant lullaby. I drifted to sleep, dreaming of his laugh, his touch, the way he called me baby, like it was a secret only we shared. At 6 a.m., my phone jolted me awake, its shrill ring cutting through the haze of sleep. I fumbled for it. Eyes bleary, the screen glowing with unknown number. My first thought was him. His phone often showed up as unknown, a quirk of his ancient carrier plan. He sometimes called early before work, catching me in that soft space between dreams and dawn. I pressed the phone to my ear, my voice thick with sleep. Hey baby, came the reply, warm and familiar, wrapping around me like a blanket. I smiled, sinking back into the pillows, the world outside still cloaked in gray. He sounded like him, that low, teasing tone I'd memorized. But there was something else, a faint edge, like a note played slightly off-key. I couldn't place it, not yet. He started talking, his voice pulling me into the conversation like a tide. "I've got a little problem," he said, a playful lilt that made me grin. "I'm feeling, you know." My cheeks flushed, a giddy warmth spreading through me. At 18, those words were a spark, and I was all too eager to fan the flame. We bantered his words, painting memories of the weekend, how he loved the way I looked in that sundress, the way we danced in his living room, the way the city lights reflected in my eyes as we drove. I laughed, half asleep, but awake enough to feel the thrill of his attention, sensory overload. The room is warm. Your skin tingles. The fairy lights cast a soft glow, but the phone feels heavy, too cold against your ear. I was lost in it, in him, until he said something that snagged my attention. "I loved seeing you last weekend. That dress, the way you moved, I can't stop thinking about it." His voice lingered on the details, the exact shade of blue, the way the hem fluttered when I spun. It was precise, too precise, like he'd studied me. My smile faltered. He'd never been this specific, not like this. I pushed the thought away, chalking it up to my groggy mind. But the unease lingered, a pebble in my shoe. We kept talking, his words growing bolder, more intimate, pulling me deeper. Pattern, interruption. This is supposed to be love, but something's wrong, isn't it? The voice is his, but the words aren't. I glanced at the clock, 6:50 a.m. He'd be showering soon, getting ready for his shift. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my tone light Aren't you gonna get ready for work? There was a pause, a beat too long. Nah, he said, his voice shifting a casual drawl that didn't fit. I think I'll skip today. How about I come over now? My stomach twisted. He never skipped work. His job was strict shifts, locked in tight. Missing one could cost him his spot. And that nah, the way it rolled off his tongue, it wasn't his. My boyfriend didn't talk like that, didn't linger on vowels like they were syrup, trance, loop. He's him. But is he? You know his voice. But do you? You're safe in bed. But are you? My pulse quickened, a drumbeat in my chest. I sat up, the room suddenly too small. The fairy lights casting shadows that seemed to pulse. You okay? He asked, and for a moment, his voice snapped back, so close to his. I doubted myself. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's just tired. I forced a laugh. Yeah, sure. Come over. It'll just be us. Great, he said, too eager. Then, where is it? My breath caught. He knew where I lived, had been coming over for weeks, sneaking kisses on my doorstep, sprawled on my couch. The question hung in the air, a crack in the facade. I tried to laugh it off. You know where it is? His response was a chuckle low and wrong, nothing like the bright laugh I loved. That's not him. Neisted storytelling. I remembered a night a month ago, walking home from a date. I'd felt eyes on me, a prickle on my neck, but when I turned, the street was empty. I'd told him about it, and he'd pulled me close, promising to keep me safe. What if someone had been watching, not just then, but all weekend through those shunned windows? The thought hit like ice water. My phone buzzed a text from him, the real him. At the subway, heading to work. Love you. My blood ran cold. I texted back, fingers trembling. Why are you texting? We're talking right now. My phone rang instantly, his name on the screen. I answered, my voice shaking. What's going on? He asked, confused, his voice unmistakably, his bright and warm. I told him about the call, the voice, the details. I didn't call you, he said, his tone sharp with worry. Whoever that is, it's not me. The other line was still open. The imposter waiting. I switched back, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the dawn. Who are you? I demanded, my voice raw. What do you want? He laughed again, that wrong laugh, and said, I'm Mike. We met a long time ago. Just wanted to have fun. His words were smooth, rehearsed, but they didn't add up. My number was new, barely a month old. How do you know what I was wearing? I pressed, my voice rising. How do you know what we did? Where are you? He countered, ignoring me. Why don't we meet? I hung up, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. He called back, the unknown number glowing like a threat. I didn't answer. The room felt alive, the walls closing in the shadows, sharper watching. He knows too much. He's seen you. I called my mom, my voice breaking as I spilled everything. She told me to lock the door, stay put, and change my number. I did, huddling in my room as the city woke up outside its normalcy, a cruel contrast to my fear. I called the police, my words tumbling over each other as I explained. They opened a file, asked questions I couldn't answer: how he got my number, how he knew so much. They found nothing, no trace of Mike, no leads, but the questions gnawed at me. How did he know the color of my dress, the way we moved in his living room? His parents' house had those big windows open to the street. We hadn't been careful to, caught up in each other, to notice the world outside. Had he been there, watching his eyes, tracing every moment? The thought was a violation, a theft of something I couldn't name. My boyfriend swore he'd told no one, but the doubt lingered, a crack in our trust, embedded. Command: you're safe now, but check the windows, lock the doors, listen to the silence. Do you hear it? I changed my number that day. The new one, a flimsy shield. For weeks, I jumped at every call, every shadow. Sleep came in fragments, broken by dreams of a faceless man standing outside, his voice echoing through the phone. The police closed the case, but the fear didn't. It settled in me, a weight I carried through every quiet moment. There's one detail I've kept buried, too raw to share. That weekend, as we drove through the city, I'd seen a man on a street corner, his eyes locked on our car. He was ordinary, dark jacket, unremarkable face, but his gaze was heavy, like he was memorizing us. I'd brushed it off, a fleeting unease, drowned in laughter. Now I wonder if that was him, if Mike was more than a voice, if he was out there, watching, waiting, anchoring. That call changed you, didn't it? Every time the phone rings, you hesitate, don't you? You feel him just beyond the line. 10 years later, I'm married to the man whose voice was stolen, but the memory of that morning lingers. I check the locks, close the curtains, and never answer unknown numbers. That voice, so close to love, was a lie, and it taught me that safety is an illusion, that a stranger can reach you through the things you trust most. He's gone, but is he? You're safe. But are you? The storm wasn't the only thing breaking into my house that night. Rain lashed against my windows, a relentless roar that drowned out the world. But it was the faint thud from downstairs that stopped my heart. I was alone, sprawled on my bed, the TV flickering with some late-night rerun I wasn't really watching. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and the electric tang of a thunderstorm rolling through. My house, a small 2-story, nestled in a quiet suburb, had always felt like a fortress. But that night, the walls seemed to pulse with something alive, something that didn't belong. Storms like this were rare here, the kind that made the ground shake and the power flicker. I'd grown up with them, learned to ride out the chaos with a blanket and a book. But this one felt different, heavier, like it carried a secret in its wind. I muted the TV, straining to hear over the rain. Nothing. Just the howl of the storm, the occasional crack of thunder. I told myself it was the house settling an old place with quirks I'd never bothered to fix. But my pulse didn't slow, and my eyes kept darting to the bedroom door, half expecting it to creak open on its own. Then it came again, a dull, deliberate thud, like something heavy hitting the floor. It wasn't the storm. My stomach twisted, a cold shore of dread tightening. I slipped off the bed, my bare feet sinking into the worn carpet, and grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand. The power hadn't gone out yet, but I wasn't taking chances. I crept to the top of the stairs, the beam of light cutting through the dim hallway. The living room was down there, where I'd left a lamp on its glow, a faint promise of normalcy. But the sound hadn't come from nowhere. I needed to check. The stairs groaned under my weight, each step amplifying the storm's fury. Rain battered the windows, blurring the world outside into a smear of gray and black. I reached the living room and froze. The lamp, a wobbly antique I'd meant to replace, lay sprawled across the hardwood floor, its shade crumpled like a broken wing. It hadn't fallen on its own. That lamp was unsteady, sure, but it took a nudge to tip it over, a nudge I hadn't given. My breath caught the flashlight, trembling in my hand as I swept the beam across the room. The couch, the coffee table, the bookshelves, everything was as I'd left it. Or was it? A shadow flickered in the corner, gone before I could focus. I forced myself to move, picking up the lamp with shaking hands. The base was heavier than I remembered, the metal cold against my skin. I set it back on the end table, my eyes scanning the room for anything else out of place. The storm wasn't shaking the house hard enough to knock it over. Something else had. I checked the front door locked, the windows sealed, but the unease grew a weight pressing on my chest. I couldn't stay down here, not with the storm screaming and the lamp's fall echoing in my mind. I headed back upstairs, the flashlight's beam bouncing off the walls like a warning. Back in my room, I locked the door, a flimsy barrier that felt more like a placebo than protection. I turned the TV volume down, letting the storm's rhythm fill the space. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe the lamp had just given up, tired of its precarious perch. But then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. The rain, loud as it was, had shifted, grown sharper, almost like it was inside the house. My heart slammed against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that matched the thunder. I opened my bedroom door, the hallway dark, except for the faint glow from the living room below. The sound was clearer now, a steady patter, like water hitting something solid. I followed it, step by cautious step. The flashlight gripped like a lifeline. The noise led me to the hallway near the kitchen, where an awkward storage closet sat, its door slightly ajar. I hadn't been in there in months, not since I'd stuffed it with old boxes and forgotten tools. But I knew what was inside, a small window, high on the wall, the kind you'd never think to check. The sound was coming from there. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob, the metal cold and slick. I pulled the door open, and the air rushed out, damp and heavy. The window was wide open, rain pouring in, pooling on the boxes below. Water slapped the sill, a mocking rhythm that echoed in my skull. 6 months. That's how long it had been since I'd touched that closet, let alone the window. I would have never left it open, not in a storm, not ever. My breath hitched, the flashlight beam shaking as I scanned the closet. The boxes were soaked, their edges curling, but nothing else seemed disturbed. Or did it? A scuff mark on the floor, faint but fresh, caught my eye. Someone had been here. The realization hit like a thunderclap, my legs nearly buckling. I slammed the window shut, the glass rattling in its frame, and turned to face the house. My house, now a maze of shadows and secrets. I was alone. Or was I? My phone was upstairs on the bed, a mistake I cursed myself for. I could run for it, lock myself in my room, call the police, or I could leave, get in my car, and drive until the storm was a memory. But the thought of staying, of waiting for whoever had opened that window to find me, was unbearable. I grabbed my car keys from the kitchen counter, my hands slick with sweat, and moved toward the front door. The hallway stretched before me, longer than it should have been, the storm's roar, a constant reminder of my isolation. Halfway to the door, it happened. Footsteps, heavy and fast, thundered down the upstairs hallway, right above my head. They were moving toward the stairs, deliberate, not the aimless creak of an old house. My blood turned to ice, my body frozen for a split second before instinct took over. I ran the keys, jangling in my hand, the front door, my only goal. The footsteps reached the stairs, their rhythm closing in a predator's pace. I fumbled with the lock, my fingers clumsy, and threw the door open, rain soaking me instantly. I didn't look back, didn't dare as I sprinted to my car, the storm swallowing my gasps. I locked myself in the engine roaring to life as I backed out, tires skidding on the wet driveway. Only then did I glance at the house, its windows dark, the front door swinging in the wind. No one was there. Or were they? A shape vague and fleeting moved behind the living room window, gone before I could be sure. I dialed 911 through the car's system, my voice shaking as I told the operator everything: the lamp, the window, the footsteps. The police arrived minutes later, their flashlights cutting through the rain. They found nothing. No footprints, no signs of a break-in, just an empty house and a window I swore I hadn't opened. They said the lamp could have fallen from the storm's vibrations, the window left ajar by accident. But I knew better. The scuff mark in the closet, the footsteps, they weren't my imagination. Someone had been in my house, hiding, waiting. For what? To rob me, to watch me to do worse. The police report mentioned the closet wall running along the end table where the lamp sat, suggesting vibrations from the window being forced open might have knocked it over. But that didn't explain the footsteps, the speed, the intent. Whoever it was had been upstairs, maybe in the spare room, maybe closer, listening as I watched TV, unaware. I didn't go back that night. I stayed at a motel, the storm's echo haunting my dreams. When I returned, the house felt different, tainted like a stranger's skin over familiar bones. I fixed the lamp, cleaned the closet, but the fear stayed a shadow that moved with me. I installed cameras, changed the locks, but they're just props against a truth I can't shake. Someone was in my home, steps away from my bedroom, and I'll never know why. Sometimes, when the house is too quiet, I hear those footsteps again, and I wonder if they're still waiting for me to fall asleep. That night, the storm wasn't the only thing that shook me. I was alone in a gas station, the world outside swallowed by rain and wind, when a man stepped out of the dark, his presence a blade against my nerves. His eyes held no humanity. His hands carried the stain of something unspeakable. And for 20 minutes, I stood on the edge of a choice that could have ended me. The gas station was my second home in the spring of 2018, a fluorescent lit box on the edge of a small town where the highway stretched into nothingness. I was 22, working afternoons to pay for college, my days filled with coffee and the hum of pumps. The job was dull, but steady, the kind of routine that lulled you into complacency. Every few weeks, I'd cover an overnight shift, 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. for overtime, a grueling stretch that left me wired and weary. That night, I'd gotten the call in the morning, the manager's voice clipped with urgency. I agreed without hesitation, the extra cash, a siren song. The station was a relic, its paint peeling the neon sign flickering like a dying star. Inside it smelled of stale coffee and motor oil, the shelves stocked with dusty snacks and cheap lighters. The front counter was my fortress, a scratched slab of wood with a phone, a register, and a panic button I'd never touched. Outside, 4 pumps stood under a sagging canopy, their lights buzzing in the quiet. The town was sleepy, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. But at night, it felt abandoned, the darkness pressing against the glass. By 9 p.m., I'd settled in, the manager long gone. I flipped on the radio, static-laced country music filling the silence. The forecast had warned of a storm, but I hadn't expected its ferocity. By 10 p.m., rain lashed the windows, wind howling like a living thing. The station was dead. No cars, no customers, just me and the storm. I pulled on my raincoat, a flimsy shield against the deluge, and stepped outside to secure the pumps. Loose signs and trash cans rattled in the wind, threatening to break free. I hauled them inside my boots, slipping on wet concrete, the cold biting through my gloves. Halfway through, I froze. Across the street, beyond the halo of the pumps, a figure moved. A man pacing along the sidewalk, his silhouette blurred by rain. He was soaked, his jacket clinging to him, his head bowed against the wind. I squinted my breath, fogging the air. Who's out in this? No cars were parked nearby, no bus stop for miles. He seemed to be waiting. But for what? I shook it off, assuming he was stranded, maybe hoping for a ride. I finished the task, my eyes darting to him as I hurried back inside the door, locking behind me with a heavy thud. 2 hours later, the storm had worsened thunder, rumbling like distant artillery. The wind slammed against the building, rattling the windows, the front doors shuddering as if they'd tear free. I'd retreated to the counter, my hands wrapped around a lukewarm coffee. The radio now silent, drowned by the chaos outside. The man was still out there. I'd glimpsed him earlier, still pacing, still alone. 2 hours in this rain. My stomach twisted, a vague unease taking root. Sensory overload. The rain hammers the glass, The wind screams, the lights flicker, and your pulse is a steady throb, warning you something's wrong. I tried to focus, restocking cigarettes, wiping down the counter, anything to keep my hands busy. But the image of him lingered, his relentless pacing, his refusal to seek shelter. Pattern interruption. This is just a quiet night. But that man out there, he's not right. Is he? I glanced at the phone, tempted to call someone. Anyone but who? The police, for a guy standing in the rain. I laughed it off, but the sound felt hollow, swallowed by the storm. Then it happened. A muffled sound cut through the roar of the wind fist on glass, deliberate and urgent. I froze, my eyes snapping to the front doors. He was there, pressed against the glass. His face shadowed his hands, pounding. The doors shook, the bolt straining. My heart lurched, instinct screaming to stay put, but his silhouette looked desperate, lost. What if he's hurt? I grabbed the keys, my hands trembling, and moved to the doors, peering through the rain-streaked glass. He was soaked, his jacket dripping, his eyes hidden under a hood. I hesitated, then slid the bolt back, the door swinging open. With a gust of icy air, he rushed inside, water pooling at his feet, his breath ragged. I locked the doors behind him, my voice unsteady. You okay? Need help? He didn't answer, just started pacing the aisle, his boots leaving wet streaks on the linoleum. His movements were erratic, like a caged animal, his head jerking toward the windows, then back to the floor. I stepped back the counter, a barrier between us. Hey, you good? I tried again, louder. Nothing. Just pacing back and forth, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Nested storytelling. Last month, a coworker told me about a guy who'd come in late, acting strange, muttering to himself. He'd left without incident, but she said his eyes were empty, like he wasn't all there. Was this him? Or something worse? I watched him, my unease growing. His jacket was dark, but in the fluorescent light, I saw something. His hands, when they slipped from his pockets, were raw knuckles, bruised and bloody, like he'd been hitting something or someone. My breath caught the air in the station, suddenly too thin. Trance loop. He's just a guy, but is he? Those hands that bled. What did he do? You're safe behind the counter. But are you? I edged toward the phone, my eyes locked on him. He was still pacing his steps, heavy, his gaze fixed on some unseen point. I reached for the receiver, my fingers brushing the plastic, but his head snapped up, his eyes meeting mine. They were hollow, devoid of warmth, like staring into a void. "Don't," he said, his voice low, a warning, wrapped in ice. I froze my hand, hovering, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the storm. He knows what I'm thinking. His stare pinned me unblinking, as if weighing his next move. I lowered the phone, my throat tight, every instinct screaming to run. But where? The storm raged outside, the doors locked the back room, a dead end. Embedded command. Stay calm, don't move, just wait. He'll leave, won't he? He turned away, resuming his pacing, but the tension hung thick, a wire stretched to breaking. For 20 minutes, I stood there, watching him circle the aisles, his bloody hands swinging at his sides. The storm shook the building, the lights flickering, casting his shadow in jagged bursts. Every step he took felt like a countdown, every glance a threat. I ran through options, run for the back, hit the panic button, scream, but each felt like a gamble with my life. What does he want? Why is he here? The blood on his hands was a story I didn't want to read, but my mind wrote it anyway. Someone hurt, someone gone, and me alone with him. I chose the riskiest path, do nothing. I stood frozen, my breath shallow, praying he'd tire, leave, vanish into the storm. His pacing slowed, his head tilting, as if listening to something beyond the rain. Then, without warning, he stopped, his eyes flicking to me one last time. He moved to the doors, slid the bolt back, and stepped into the night, the darkness swallowing him whole. I lunged for the phone, dialing 911, my voice shaking as I spilled everything, his pacing, his hands, his eyes. The operator told me to stay put, lock the doors, wait. I did, my back pressed against the counter, the storm's roar my only companion. The police arrived over 30 minutes later, their lights cutting through the rain. They searched the lot, the street, the woods beyond, but found nothing. No man, no tracks, no clues. The storm had erased him, or he'd known how to disappear. I gave my statement, my words stumbling, the memory of his eyes burning in my mind. The officers were kind but skeptical. Maybe he was just a drifter, they said, caught in the storm. But I knew better. Those hands weren't from a fall or a fight gone wrong. They were a mark, a warning of something darker. I finished my shift in a daze, the station no longer a refuge, but a cage, its walls too thin to keep the world out. The next day, the news broke. A woman 34 hadn't come home from work the night before. She'd left her office at 11 p.m. Her car found abandoned a few miles from town. No suspects, No leads, just a void where she'd been. The timeline fit too neatly. Her disappearance, a shadow cast by the man in my station. Was it him? Did I let a monster walk away? The thought was a weight crushing me with every replay of that night. I don't work overnights anymore. The gas station is still there, its neon sign still flickering, but I can't drive past without feeling him, his eyes, his hands, his silence. I check my locks, my windows, my mirrors, always expecting to see him in the corner of my vision. Anchoring. That night marked you, didn't it? Every time you're alone, you feel him, don't you? I tell myself he's gone, that I survived, but the doubt lingers a whisper in the quiet. There's one thing I haven't told anyone. As he left, his jacket caught on the door, revealing a glint of metal at his waist. A knife, its blade dulled by use. I didn't tell. The police didn't know why I froze, but that image haunts me, a promise of what could have been. That night, I stood inches from something evil, and I'll never know how close I came to its edge. He's out there somewhere, isn't he? The rain didn't just flood the road. That night, it drowned my sense of safety, pulling me into a darkness I barely escaped. I was driving home from a late shift, my security uniform still clinging to my skin, damp with sweat and the weight of a long night. The storm had turned the world into a blur of water and wind, the kind that made every road a gamble. My headlights cut through the downpour, illuminating sheets of rain that danced across the asphalt. It was 1 a.m., and the streets were empty, the city holding its breath under the storm's assault. I'd taken the back roads, a shortcut through quiet, winding streets I knew like the back of my hand. But tonight, those roads felt like a trap. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles pale, the wipers struggling to keep up with the deluge. The radio was off. The only sound, the rhythmic slap of rain against the windshield, a pulse that matched my own. I'd been a security guard for years, trained to stay calm, to assess threats, but nothing prepared me for the unease creeping up my spine. The storm was bad, worse than I'd expected, and the water was pooling on the road, turning it into a glassy mirror that reflected my headlights back at me. I should have taken the main highway, but it was too late now. The back roads stretched ahead, dark and endless, flanked by trees that swayed like specters in the wind. I came to a bend where the road dipped, and my headlights caught a wall of water shimmering and deep, blocking my path. It wasn't just a puddle. It was a flood, maybe 3 feet high, swallowing the asphalt like a living thing. My stomach sank. Driving through that was a death wish. My old sedan wouldn't make it. I cursed under my breath, shifting into reverse, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty, or so I thought. I started to back up, planning a 3-point turn to retrace my route, when my car erupted in a frantic beeping. The proximity sensor screamed a high-pitched warning that something was too close. I slammed on the brakes, my heart lurching into my throat. I twisted in my seat, peering through the back window. There, inches from my bumper, was a car, dark sleek, its headlights off a shadow that had materialized from nowhere. How had I not seen it? I'd been alone on this one-lane road for 10 minutes. No lights, no movement, just the storm and me. My pulse raced a drumbeat against my ribs. The car just sat there, unmoving, its outline barely visible through the rain-streaked glass. I waited, expecting them to back up, to turn on their lights, to do something. But they didn't. The rain ticked against my roof, each drop a countdown to something I couldn't name. I honked short and sharp, hoping to snap them out of it. Nothing. I honked again, longer, this time the sound swallowed by the storm. The longer I sat there, the heavier the air felt, like the car behind me was pressing against my chest. Then their driver's door opened. A man stepped out, his figure blurred by the rain, dressed in black, a hood obscuring his face. He moved toward my window, his steps slow, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. My breath caught as he raised a hand and knocked the sound dull against the glass. Knock, knock, knock. Each tap was a challenge, a dare to engage with whatever he was. I didn't roll down the window. My training kicked in. Assess, don't react. He knocked again, his hand lingering, the rain streaming down his sleeve. Up close, I could see the edge of his hood, the shadow where a face should have been. He didn't speak, didn't gesture, just stood there, a silhouette against the storm. My mind raced. Was he drunk? Lost. But no one sane would be out here, headlights off in a flood. I shifted into drive, inching forward, careful not to hit the water. He followed, staying right beside my window, his steps matching my car's slow crawl. He wasn't letting me go. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm that drowned out the rain. I scanned the road, the floodwater glinting like a warning. I couldn't go forward, couldn't back up without hitting his car. I was trapped, the storm closing in the man, a shadow that wouldn't leave. Then, out of nowhere, another sound, a sharp rap on the passenger window. My head snapped to the right. Another man, dressed like the first, his face hidden under a hood, stood there, his hand pressed against the glass. My breath stopped. There were two of them. I glanced back, and in the faint glow of my taillights, I saw a third figure approaching, moving through the rain. Like a ghost, panic surged a tidal wave that swept away reason. I didn't think, didn't weigh options. I floored the gas, the car lurching forward, tires skidding on the wet road. For a terrifying moment, the wheels spun, losing traction, the floodwater lapping at the hood. I thought I was done, stuck at their mercy. But the tires caught, and I yanked the wheel, swinging the car around in a desperate arc. The men shouted their voices, lost in the storm, as I sped past them, the flooded road a blur in my mirrors. I didn't look back, didn't dare my hands shaking on the wheel as I raced toward the main road. The highway was a lifeline, its lights a beacon through the rain. I pulled over at a gas station, my chest heaving, and called 911. My voice was a mess, words tumbling out, flooded road car behind me. 3 men, no headlights. The police arrived later that night, their cruisers cutting through the storm. They found the car still parked by the flood abandoned. It was stolen, traced to a dealership hundreds of miles away, taken months ago. The men were gone, swallowed by the night, leaving no trace. The officers asked me questions, their faces skeptical, but I saw the truth in their eyes. They knew I'd escaped something bad. I drove home. The storm still raging, my mind replaying every moment. The car with no headlights, the man at my window, the second knock, the third figure. What did they want? A robbery. Something worse. My security training hadn't prepared me for this, for the way fear could linger, seeping into my bones. I started taking the main roads, avoiding the back streets, but the memory of that night is a shadow that follows me. Every dark road, every storm brings it back, their hooded figures, their silence, their presence. Last fall, I sought solitude in the vast Alaskan wilderness, my RV a fragile shield against the endless dark. But the forest held more than silence. Footsteps circled my camp, and a knock at my door revealed a threat I never saw coming. That night, I learned the wild doesn't just hide animals. It conceals monsters who wear human faces. October 2024 was my escape. A road trip to my grandparents' cabin in Alaska, a place of quiet beauty nestled in the mountains. I'd driven my RV, a clunky but reliable beast, through the endless highways, leaving the noise of city life behind. At 31, I craved the open road, the chance to breathe air untouched by exhaust, to sleep under stars that felt close enough to touch. My grandparents' home was a haven filled with family who'd flown in for the season. Cousins, aunts, uncles, their voices weaving a tapestry of warmth. But as October waned, snow loomed, and I had to head south before the roads turned treacherous. The Alcan Highway was a beast of its own, a ribbon of asphalt threading through forests, valleys, and mountains. Cell service was a myth for most of it, the world reduced to my RV, the road, and the occasional truck stop. I'd grown used to the isolation, even loved it, the way the world fell away, leaving only my thoughts and the hum of the engine. On my second day back, I drove until dusk, my eyes burning from the glare of snow-dusted hills. At 8 p.m., I found a pull-off a dirt path veering into a clearing between towering pines. It was small, barely big enough for my RV, the only spot for miles. I parked the tires, crunching gravel, and cut the engine, the silence rushing in like a tide. Half an hour into the movie, I paused, my hand frozen on the remote. A sound, faint, rhythmic, cut through the quiet. Footsteps crunching on the gravel outside. My heart skipped a jolt of adrenaline, waking me fully. I set the remote down, my eyes darting to the window, its blinds shut tight. Sensory overload. The air is heavy. The RV's walls feel thin. Your pulse races, and the forest outside is alive, watching. I listened, straining to hear over the thud of my heart. The steps were slow, deliberate, circling the RV, pausing, then moving again. I crept to the window, my fingers trembling as I lifted a blind just an inch. The darkness was absolute, a void that swallowed my gaze. No flashlight, no headlights, nothing to reveal the source. Pattern interruption. You're alone, safe in your RV, but those steps, they're not an animal, are they? I tried to rationalize, maybe a deer, a bear, or another camper I hadn't seen. But the rhythm was too human, too purposeful. I checked the door, the lock firm, and sat back. My movie. Forgotten the silence. Now, a weight pressing against me. Nestead storytelling. I remembered a story my cousin told at the cabin about a hiker who'd vanished on this stretch of highway. His pack was found, but no body, no trace. Locals whispered about drifters, people who lived off the grid, watching from the trees. The thought chilled me, but I pushed it away. If it was a person, they'd parked somewhere nearby. There were no other vehicles in the clearing. I considered turning on the exterior lights, but something stopped me. A primal instinct to stay hidden, to not draw attention. The footsteps faded, and for a few minutes, the night was still. I exhaled my shoulders, loosening, and restarted the movie. The sound low. I told myself it was nothing, just the forest playing tricks. By 9:30, I crawled into bed, the RV's heater humming, the blankets heavy. I set my alarm for dawn, knowing I had a long drive ahead. Sleep came slowly, the memory of those steps lingering like a bruise. At 2 a.m., my eyes snapped open, my body rigid. 3 sharp knocks shook the RV's door, each one a hammer against my nerves. I sat up the reading light, casting jagged shadows across the walls. "I just need some water," a voice called, deep and gravelly, like it belonged to someone older, weathered. Then I'll be on my way. My breath caught my mind racing. Who's out there at this hour? The clock glowed red, the forest beyond the windows, a black abyss. I stayed still, my hands gripping the blanket. "Why are you out here?" I called, my voice steadier than I felt. "How'd you get here?" A pause, long and heavy. Then his reply. "My truck broke down a couple miles back. Just need help. No trouble." His words were calm, but they didn't fit. The nearest road was miles away, and no one walked this far in the freezing dark. Trance. Loop. He's just a stranded driver. But is he? You're safe in here. But are you? He needs help. But does he? My gut screamed danger, a warning I couldn't ignore. I crept to the side window, my movements slow, silent. I peered through a crack in the blind, the darkness thick, but I saw him, a figure pressed close to the door. Too close, like he was listening, waiting. His outline was vague, but then I saw more shapes moving in the trees, at least 4 or 5, their forms shifting in the shadows. My blood froze. He's not alone. The man knocked again, harder, the door rattling in its frame. "Come on," he said, his voice sharper, losing patience, embedded. Command. Stay quiet. Don't move. Don't let them know. You see them. They're waiting, aren't they? I backed away, my eyes darting to the keys on the table. My heart pounded a drumbeat, drowning out the night. I had one chance, one moment to act. I grabbed the keys, my hands shaking, and took a deep breath, steeling myself. I ran to the driver's seat, the RV's interior a maze in the dark, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, the headlights flaring, illuminating the clearing. They were there. 5 men, mid-30s to 40s, scruffy, their faces caught in the glare. Beards, ragged coats, eyes wide with fury. They shouted their voices, a chaotic snarl, as I threw the RV into gear. The tires spun, gravel flying, as I swung toward the road. One lunged forward, his hand grazing the side, but I didn't stop. The RV lurched onto the highway, the men's yells fading behind me, swallowed by the forest. I drove my knuckles, white, my breath shallow, until I reached a gas station 30 miles away, its neon lights a beacon in the dark. I called the police, my voice trembling as I explained the footsteps, the knock, the group. They sent a patrol to the clearing, but found nothing. No tracks, no signs, the snow covering any trace. The officer was kind, but his tone suggested doubt. Maybe I'd misjudged. Maybe they were just campers. But I knew what I'd seen, those eyes, that anger. They weren't there to camp, to talk, to ask for water. They'd planned something I'd escaped by seconds. I didn't sleep that night. Sitting in the gas station's lot, the RV's engine still warm. The forest had felt alive, watching its silence, a lie hiding their intent. I drove on at dawn, the highway stretching south, but the memory clung to me, a shadow in my rearview mirror. I haven't been back to Alaska, haven't camped since. The open road, once my freedom, now feels like a trap, a place where eyes wait in the dark. I don't trust the quiet anymore. Every rustle, every shadow carries their presence, those men, their faces burned into my mind. Anchoring. That night marked you, didn't it? Every time you're alone in the dark, you hear them. Don't you? I check my locks, avoid remote places, and dread the stillness of the wild. The RV was my sanctuary, but it became a target, a reminder that solitude invites danger, that a knock can hide a multitude. There's one detail I've kept silent. As I drove away, my headlights caught something in the snow, a glint sharp and metallic. A knife, half buried its blade, stained dark. I didn't stop, didn't tell the police, too scared to face what it meant. But I see it in my dreams, that knife and them waiting in the trees, their plan unfinished. Christmas was supposed to be warm, but that night my home turned cold with the presence of something hiding in the shadows. I'd driven 45 minutes from my parents' house, the holiday glow of their decorations fading in my rearview mirror as I headed home. The roads were silent, the kind of quiet that feels sacred on Christmas night, with street lights casting soft halos on the asphalt. My house, a modest one-story, tucked in a sleepy neighborhood, waited for me, its dark windows reflecting the stillness. I pulled into the garage, the door rumbling shut behind me, and stepped inside, expecting the comfort of routine. But the moment I flicked on the entrance light, something was wrong. Papers littered the hallway floor, scattered like leaves after a storm. They were from a stack of mail I'd left on the counter, bills and holiday cards I hadn't sorted. I froze, my keys still clutched in my hand, the metal biting into my palm. I'd rushed out that morning. Yes, but I hadn't touched that stack. Had I? The air felt heavy, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. I bent down, gathering the papers, my eyes darting to the corners of the room. The living room lamp was on its glow, steady, but the shadows it cast seemed to shift just beyond my focus. I told myself it was nothing, a draft, my own carelessness. But my pulse didn't agree, thudding in my ears like a warning. I moved through the house, flipping on every light, the hum of electricity, a thin shield against the unease. The living room was as I'd left it, a sad little Christmas tree in the corner, its fake branches drooping under a string of lights, a half-empty coffee mug on the table. I sank onto the couch, trying to shake the feeling, and turned on the TV. A Netflix Christmas movie flickered to life, all snow and forced cheer, but it couldn't drown out the silence pressing against the walls. I wanted to lose myself in the story, to let the holiday magic pull me back. But something kept tugging at my attention, a faint sound, so soft, I wasn't sure it was real. It came again, a subtle shift, like the house itself was breathing. I muted the TV, my heart climbing into my throat. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. I strained to listen, my body tense, every nerve on edge. Nothing. I unmuted the movie, the dialogue jarring in the quiet, but the sound came again, sharper this time, like a foot brushing against the floor. Was it upstairs? My house wasn't big. Just a few rooms and a small attic space I rarely used. I paused the movie again, holding my breath, waiting. The silence mocked me, daring me to move. I stood, my legs unsteady, and grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. The beam cut through the dim hallway, its light cold and unyielding. I checked the back door, locked, the windows sealed, but the feeling didn't leave a weight that clung to my skin. I told myself I was tired, that the long day with family had frayed my nerves. But as I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step deliberate, I couldn't shake the sense that I wasn't alone. The attic doors at the end of the hall was closed, its outline barely visible in the dark. I hadn't opened it in months, but now it loomed, a silent accusation. I stepped into my bedroom, flicking on the overhead light. The room was familiar. Bed unmade, clothes draped over a chair, but it felt wrong. The air was stale, heavy, with a scent I couldn't place, like dust disturbed after too long. My eyes scanned the space, searching for something out of place. The dresser drawer was slightly ajar, just enough to notice. Had I left it like that? I moved closer. my hand trembling as I pulled it open. Nothing was missing, but the contents, socks, t-shirts, were shifted as if someone had rifled through them. Someone had been here. My breath caught a cold wave of fear washing over me. I backed out of the room, the flashlight beam shaking in my hand. I stood at the top of the stairs, staring down into the darkened living room. The Christmas tree's lights twinkled, mocking the panic rising in my chest. Was someone still here? I called out, my voice thin. Is anyone here? I've called the cops. A lie, but it felt like armor. The house answered with silence, thick and oppressive. I started down the stairs, each step a test of courage, my eyes locked on the living room below. Halfway down, I heard it a rush of movement, fast and heavy from the living room. The Christmas tree's branches swayed their lights, flickering as something brushed past. My heart stopped, my body frozen on the stairs. A figure, vague and dark, darted through the kitchen toward the back door. I ran after it, the flashlight beam bouncing wildly, catching only glimpses. A shadow, a blur of motion. The back door was ajar, swinging in the night air, the cold rushing in like an uninvited guest. I reached it just as the figure vanished into the darkness outside the door, slamming shut behind them. I stood there, my hand on the doorknob, my breath ragged. The Christmas movie was still paused on the TV, its frozen frame a surreal contrast to the chaos in my mind. I locked the door, my fingers fumbling, and dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm, a lifeline I clung to as I recounted the night, the papers, the sounds, the drawer, the figure. The police arrived within minutes, their flashlights sweeping the house, but they found nothing. No footprints in the yard, no signs of forced entry. They suggested the papers fell when I opened the garage, that the sounds were the house settling, that the drawer was my own forgetfulness. But they didn't explain the figure, the tree's branches, the door. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, the flashlight in one hand, a kitchen knife in the other, the Christmas tree's lights casting eerie shadows across the walls. The police said nothing was taken, but they were wrong. They took my peace, my sense of home. I kept replaying it, the papers, the sounds, the drawer, the figure hiding just out of sight. Had they been there the whole time, watching me watch that movie, waiting in the dark? The thought was a splinter in my mind, sharp and unrelenting. I moved the Christmas tree the next day, unable to look at it without seeing those branches move. I checked the attic, the closets, every corner, but found nothing. The police closed the case, no evidence to pursue. But I know what I saw, what I felt. The house doesn't feel like mine anymore. its walls holding secrets I can't uncover. Every night I check the locks, my eyes lingering on the windows, the shadows outside. What if they come back? Christmas used to mean warmth, family safety. Now it's a reminder that something was in my home, and I'll never know what it wanted or when it might return.